At this point in time, I'd like to call on stage our CEO, Ms. Phyllis Okiaga, to give us opening remarks for day 3 of the summit. A round of applause for Ms. Phyllis as she comes on stage, please. Many thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning again. It's a pleasure to see all of you. I think this is the 3rd day we are standing here to speak on different topics. As Jeff has mentioned, we started the first day when we launched the shopping festival at Changamka, Kenya 2021. We started with a conversation on taxation, policy, and yesterday we had a whole day of Clean Energy Expo, and today we are on skills development and the youth. So it's a pleasure to be here again. Allow me first to recognize the key guests who have joined us today. We have the Principal Secretary, State Department for Vocational and Technical Training, Dr. Margaret Mwakima. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We also have the GIZ Head of Component, Thomas Jeske. Thank you so much for coming, and also your colleague. We have with us the National Construction Authority, Engineer Crispus Ndinyo, who is in charge of training and capacity building. We appreciate you. We also have Dr. Kamau Gashigi, who's on his way. He'll be joining us shortly. We have the team from MasterCard, led by Ivy Moy. Thank you so much for joining us also today. The TVET institutions, students who are joining us virtually. I know a number of people who are joining virtually because we are still trying to keep everyone engaged, even if they can't come physically. Then we have my chairman, Mushai Kunyiha. Thank you for representing the board and for being here with us, and the members of the secretariat from Kam who are here with us. So Laila Akita, a Ghanaian inspirational author, said, "Human skill development in any nation is key for economic growth. And as an association, we believe in skills development to drive industrial development and consequently to create jobs and alleviate poverty. We recognize that competitive skills are key to industrializing our nation, and it helps us become a global manufacturing hub and drive fresh impetus into our economy. Competitive skills can be described as the right quality of skills at the right cost and available when needed." Since 2017, we've partnered with the German Development Corporation, GIZ, to promote skills development and provide young graduates with opportunities for practical learning through technical vocational educational and training program. The program we run seeks to provide a link between manufacturers, technical training institutions, and the policymakers. Through the program, we've reached over 1,000 young people between the time we started running it. We've been able to train them on work readiness. We've provided them with soft skills that enable them to be ready for the labor market. We've matched them with industries for paid internships and jobs. And out of this, at least 15% of them have started their own businesses. We've also been able to extend our partnership with funding from Korean International Cooperation Agency, KOICA, and we hope to reach more than another 1,000 young people through this project, where 300 are TVET graduates in various skills. We will also have 300 in green jobs. 960 shall participate also in the competency-based education and training, CBET training, in manual arc welding, lathe machine operations, and simple automation. We shall also be working with the Nyeri National Polytechnic, the Meru National Polytechnic, the Technical University of Mombasa, TUM, and St. Kizito Vocational Training Institute on the CBET component of the program. Some of the technical institutions are also exhibiting their innovations as part of Changamka, and we welcome you to visit their booths once we are done with the conversations here this morning. So in regards to COVID, the resilience and opportunities, it's without doubt that the pandemic revealed that the community is resilient, and the manufacturing sector suffered shocks arising from the pandemic, but we did become more innovative, and we took advantage of the nascent opportunities that were revealed during the COVID period to overcome the crisis. Last year, we also partnered with KPMG to develop and launch the Manufacturing Resilience and Sustainability Strategy that identified close to 80 opportunities in various manufacturing sectors, which, if nurtured, will drive the country into an export-led economy through increased production. So for us, as I said, production means really having a skilled workforce for the manufacturing sector. However, we are facing a skills gap as a country, and the pandemic provides us with an opportunity to mitigate the skills gap challenge currently facing industry. And we can do this by doing some of the following. First of all, identifying skills demand for the current and future labor markets, supporting curricular development and reviews. Manufacturers under Kam are members of the various skills advisory committees where they advise on curricula and the labor market needs. We also provide guidance on the quality of talent that joins the labor market to enable training institutions to adapt to the market trends. We are also part of technical training institution boards to ensure increased cohesion between industry and the training centers, as well as bringing practical expertise on leadership and governance to training institutions. Kam has also trained technical institution boards and leaders on governance and accountability so that we strengthen the partnership that we have. We are also offering opportunities for competitive skills development within industry and partnering with training institutions on research and innovation. So as a sector, as we continue to recover from the COVID-19 slump, there remains a significant room for improvement, particularly in the area of workforce development. Persistent shortages in skilled manufacturing labor have actually forced some manufacturers to curtail production and defer expansion plans. And that's something that we don't want to see in light of the fact that we need more jobs in our country. As modern manufacturing operations also move to automation, so must the training offered in technical institutions so that we catch up with Industry 4.0. The revitalization of skills remains an important component to facilitate growth in advanced manufacturing. Every training program requires a comprehensive understanding and hands-on experience to enable us keep up with global trends. I urge all of us to continue working with us as the Kenya Association of Manufacturers to drive the skills agenda. We've barely scratched the surface. There's a lot of room for more partnership and more collaboration into the future. Thank you so much, and I wish you all a very successful day today. Thanks.
Thanks for that, our CEO, Ms. Phyllis Wakiaga. At this point, I'd like to call on stage our Chairman of the Board, Mr. Muchai Kunyiha, who will give his address and also invite one of our key guests as well. A round of applause for Mr. Muchai tafadhali.
Thank you, and good morning all. A warm welcome to our chief guest, Dr. Margaret Mwakima, our other guests from GIZ, NCA, MasterCard, and those who are online joining us for this summit talking about youth and employment. From a board perspective, just speaking on behalf of the board, just say that at KAM we've been very supportive of this work of TVET. We've done quite a number of projects with GIZ. We are hoping to, and we are working with MasterCard on new projects, as well as with government, in creating jobs. From a big picture, manufacturing is part of the government's overall goals. It's been part of Vision 2030, growing manufacturing for a long time. It was part of the Big Four agenda as one of the pillars is growing manufacturing to 15% of our GDP. And why do we want to grow manufacturing? Two main reasons I would see it being important economically. One is about adding value, because what manufacturers do is take raw materials or materials and inputs that are available to us, whether it is coffee, it could be maize, it could be minerals or rocks, and you're trying to transform that into something else. You're adding value to it and thereby creating wealth. Because as a developing nation, one of our challenges is how do we create wealth? So it is adding value to inputs And of course, the other main input, which we are talking about today, is the labor input, that we are using people's strength, people's innovation and ingenuity, bringing them together with materials to create new things which people can use and utilize for their day-to-day lives. That's manufacturing in summary. And it's important for us as a country because we need to generate wealth and create new opportunities for our people as we go along. Of course, the big challenge we have as well is the pressure for jobs with our youth. As we've seen, we have a big population bulge, and it's not just a Kenyan problem. We could call it, it's an African problem. In Africa, this big youth bulge. I think we are about 1.2 million people coming into the workforce every year. We need to create for them meaningful and stable jobs, which again, manufacturing is able to do. So that it's a job where you are actually getting a livelihood and even things like a pension, a medical scheme, things that are going to give you a stable future as we look ahead. So growing manufacturing is important for us, and we then need the skills and the people to bring into this area. I think like Phyllis mentioned, a nice line, she said it's about skills for the current and future manufacturers or manufacturing requirements. If we are going to grow manufacturing to 15%, it is going to be our existing manufacturers who you will have an opportunity to see. If you look around the exhibition and walk around, you can see some of the things we are producing, but also new ones. We are going to have to bring in new industries, new ideas to be able to grow our industry to a bigger size and a bigger part of our GDP. And I think one of the key skills, maybe in finishing, just say one of the key skills that we really need to teach people is the ability to learn. So it's learning how to learn. Because the other thing that we are finding is technology keeps changing. And I think thanks also to the work that has been done on TVETs and what we are trying to grow, is that in the recent past, if you went to the TVETs, they had technology, but it's old technology. It's no longer what people are using. And that, again, is going to change. So we need to teach people to learn how to learn and even to learn how to innovate so that when they do come into the workforce, they are not only coming and doing routine work or whatever has been done, but they're able to bring us ideas, new ideas that we can generate and do new things. And our opportunities and capacities is huge just among our youth. If we give them the tools and the opportunities, it would be great for us to be able to move forward. We all need to come in this together. So we want to thank again the partners finally, because this is a big job. I think creating all these hopefully million jobs a year is not going to be done by manufacturers alone, by the government alone, by education alone, or by our other partners alone. We need partnership. We work together, and we'll be able to generate these new opportunities as we put our work together so that 1 + 1 becomes 3 and 5, so that our energies are put together to generate something new. So thank you very much, and thank you for attending, and we are looking forward to a good summit. I will now invite Thomas. He'll forgive me for not trying to murder his second name. So Thomas from GIZ, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dear PS TVET Daktari Margaret Wakina, dear Director General Deputy of TVETA Fred Oanda, dear CEO of KAM Phyllis Wakiaga, dear Board Chair of Kam Job Summit, dear MasterCard team, dear NCA, dear partners, dear participants. Ninaitwa Thomas, ninatoka Ujerumani, ninafanya kazi GIZ, na niko Kenya tangu mwaka moja. Ni faraha kubwa kupa hapa na wewe. Okay, now I will continue in English. I'm still learning. Next year, maybe. Kindly let me start with the role of German Development Cooperation in promoting skills development and employment in Kenya. Kenya and Germany look back on a long-standing partnership based on mutual respect and trust, with development cooperation as a core element. One of the main goals of German development cooperation is to create jobs, together with our Kenyan partners, especially for young people. The private sector is the driving force to achieve this goal. German Development Cooperation sustainable economic development activities implemented through GIZ support the Kenya government in promoting youth employment by focusing on both demand for and supply of labor. Our skills development agenda is in line with the government development agenda, contributing towards Kenya Vision 2030. In boosting skills development as a vehicle towards promoting youth employment, German Development Cooperation closely cooperates with the Ministries of Education and Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development. The Ministry's policy environment, experience, the goodwill and qualified dedicated staff complement the technical expertise we bring on the table, creating an environment for sustainable development in the sector. In this context, cooperation with the private sector to advance technical vocational education and training, TVET, skills is key to the Big Four agenda that seeks to create 1.3 million manufacturing jobs by 2022. The Employment and Skills for Development in Africa program in Kenya, the program that I'm leading, called E4D, which is financed by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, by the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, NORAD, by the Korean International Cooperation Agency, KOICA, and the General Direction International Partnerships of the European Union, is working hand in hand with Kam and selected technical training institutions that were previously mentioned to roll out competency-based education and training, CBET, thus to improve the quality of vocational training in Kenya. Through CBET, beneficiaries gain from the combination of both theory and hands-on experiences in the industry and are assessed based on international benchmarked international standards and curricula. KAM is the perfect key partner to mobilize and inform private companies about the new potentials and to select and support in the placement of the students to attachment and internships as part of the training. This process ensures the access to practical on-job experiences for students, making them conversant with the new and relevant technology in the industry. Furthermore, once the students graduate, they are proactively supported in the access to jobs, usually taking advantage of the previous practical experiences. In addition, E4D and KAM deliberately promote the dialogue between the private sector and the training institutions, providing feedback and improving the quality of the training. Summarizing, the approach has the following key elements to bridge the demand and supply sides in the labor market. One, the promotion of competency-based training. Two, the attachment of students to practical experiences in the private sector. Three, matching graduates to employers. And four, the promotion of the dialogue between the private sector and the training institutions. This approach plugs into the manufacturing priority areas and provides following benefits also for the private sector. Reduce cost and efficient use of resources due to the access to better qualified new employees. Increase in production of quality goods and services due to skilled workforce. And third, the network with technical institutions and access to new technologies that are developed by these institutions, as well as the recognition in contributing towards the government's job creation agenda and in achieving SDG 8 on decent work and economic growth. To finalize, I would like to enhance KAM's pivotal role linking the industry and the training institutions. We acknowledge their great work and continued cooperation. Asante sana.
Another round of applause, please. It's a Changamka fest, so lazima mchangamke watu wangu. Mr. Thomas, das war wonderful. Yes, we're also learning a bit of German as we move along. Asante sana for that. We'll have a bit of an exchange program on the sidelines, isn't it? My man, thank you so much for that. Of course, we're moving the conversation forward even at this point, and we're talking about upskilling, reskilling as well, because if there's one thing that the pandemic taught us is that the machines could take over. And the big question is, if they take over your job, then where do you go from there? And those are the conversations we're having right now as to how do you upskill yourself and be part of the wave moving forward and not left behind. Those are conversations we'll be having here at this particular point in time. And also interestingly, because I can see we're also having a lot of interaction as well from our live stream. What we need to remind all those participating via live stream is that if you want a contribution to be good, and really quickly, please use the hashtags that we're giving so that we can also flag them down and look at your messages really fast. Again, it's hashtag Tupatane Kasarani or hashtag Changamka Fest 2021. Once you put those in, of course, you'll be able to have them forwarded right here and be part of the conversation from wherever you're getting the right across the country. And as we talk about skills for the future, it's a very pertinent conversation to have, and that's what we'll be talking about at this particular point. Skills in the future, are we ready? That's a question you want to answer as we have our next speaker on stage. What are the opportunities available? And of course, as we talk about the Industrial Revolution, fourth one, that is, where are we as far as that revolution is concerned? That's what we want to address at this point. I'd like to call on stage Gearbox founder, Dr. Kamau Geshigi, to take us through that presentation, to let us know where we are and what we need to do to be ahead of the curve. Dr. Kamau, very thanks. That way, please.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure and honor to be asked to come to speak on this topic here. As you heard, I'm the founder of Gearbox. I have some slides I'm hoping that will be put up shortly. Is it okay? All right, so in essence, I'm standing here as the founder of Gearbox. I spent many years at the University of Nairobi teaching within the Department of Mechanical Engineering. I was teaching both mechanical and electrical engineering students, and the disconnect between what we do at the university and what the marketplace requires, especially around innovation, was very obvious and still continues to be. In other words, we're training and preparing young people for employment, and a good percentage of those that we were graduating or continue to graduate in engineering end up working in fields that are non-engineering. In other words, there's a specific orientation towards especially auditing and bank jobs. And so, in fact, we know that the major audit firms make a beeline whenever they're doing recruitment to the deans of engineering at the universities in Kenya and say, give us a list of those who got first classes, second class, and let's see whether we can hire some of them. So many of them do end up doing that. And from a policy perspective, the perspective of where we want to go as a nation, in terms especially of the big four, whereby manufacturing is one of the big four, but also underpins the other three of the big four in a very real way. If you don't have the personnel that you're producing at the university level in order to be able to deliver, then there's a problem. So we're spending government money educating people who end up not doing that role that they're supposed to. Again, at the same time, if you look at the number of engineers being produced in an economy like ours per capita in comparison with some of the countries that we try to emulate, especially in the Far East, and nowadays we used to talk about Japan and Korea, let's talk about Malaysia and Vietnam. Per capita, we are way below the number that we should be at in terms of the number of engineers being produced. And yet, ironically, the number that we are producing cannot always find jobs. So in other words, you have too few engineers coming out of the universities, but there are also too few jobs for those too few who are coming out. So there's a very paradoxical situation there. So what we did is we set up Gearbox. And Gearbox is supposed to be a place where that transition is easier. Somebody who has a good idea that can be translated, hopefully, into a product through a manufacturing process. That's what we set out to do. Now, I'd like to give some background information. My slides would have supported it, but I'll just describe it. I did some work with the World Economic Forum, and we're looking at the readiness of any nation for the fourth industrial revolution. So I think we're all aware that the pace of change of technology right now is faster than it's ever been in the history of mankind. And some people suggest that it will never be this slow again. In other words, that pace will continue to rapidly increase as we go forward, if that's possible. Now, we looked at any country. There was a formulation, a framework for looking at where a country is and its readiness for the fourth industrial revolution, whether it's a developed country technologically or not. And the framework looks at a snapshot of the current status in that country, which comprises of two elements. One is the economic complexity. And this is a very useful tool that has been developed at Harvard University, looking at the interactions between various industries, and the more the interactions, the healthier that country's economic situation in terms of industrialization capacity. And you can also put it as the variety of things that that nation can make competitively. And then the second factor is the scale of the economy in that country, the scale of the market. Now, that is a snapshot of where you are. Then we also developed within the framework 6 different tools which can be leveraged by policymakers to be able to make sure that that economy can indeed do as well as possible given that background of the fourth industrial revolution. 2 of those were technology and innovation and human capital. The others had to do with government institution strengthening, with the trade regime in terms even of the taxation and so on, how much do you tax imports, for example, and so on. Things like the demand environment in terms of climate change and so on. And so in my space where we're looking at technology and innovation and human capital development, those 2 things, the impact, the potential impact that those 2 things can have on the economy and the readiness for the fourth industrial revolution will also depend on those other 4 levers. So in other words, you're constrained. And so people in my position within the tech space, and right now we're about 40 organizations in Kenya that are hubs to try to promote innovation. We have an organization called ASEC. And our impact on the economy will depend not only on the quality of the innovations that we're encouraging and offering, or the quality of the human capital that's coming through our space, but also on those other 4 levers over which we have no power. And so we are forced to become lobbyists and be able to now speak to the government and say, look, if we want to be able to have, for example, we need to look very closely at the are we taxing, for example, so we're saying tax-free situation if you're importing computers. That's been the case for a while. But if you make components of a computer and you want to assemble it, you'll be taxed on all those components coming in, so that your computer that you've assembled in country is more expensive than the one being imported that's coming in tax-free. Things like those. Now, within the analysis of the economic complexity, the Harvard team has looked at very many countries, and they looked at Kenya. And there's a graph that they produced that is called the product space for any country. And in Kenya, what happens is you have, if you see the image, which should be up there, you have dots all over the map. And there's a density of dots that's very great in the middle, and it becomes a bit sparse outside. Now, those dots are showing the richness of interactions between different technologies. And upon that, then you place the different sectors or different types of sectors within your economy. So, for example, for the Kenya case, the major export earners in Kenya are tea, cut flowers, now increasingly titanium mineral, which is being exported at a large rate in Kenya, and others. And if you look at that product space, they sit outside the dense area in the middle. So from a policy perspective, you see immediately there's a problem. The tea industry is also outside the dense part of that model, showing that if you take, for example, what this is really saying, if you develop, let's say, a cold chain system for, let's say, for fish in Kenya. So you have companies that are able to make the refrigeration, the refrigerated trucks, and all that is really necessary to keep the fish fresh from the lake to the port. Then to be able to now step aside and do the same, use the same chain for, say, cut flowers that also require refrigeration. Logic behind this product space analysis is quite easy to see. And so if you have your major producers, contributors to your economy outside of that space, there's a problem, and you need to try and grow them in. So take tea, for example. Imagine a tea factory in India somewhere, and some gear, it breaks down in the factory floor. For them, it will probably be the solution to fixing that gear will probably be found within 4 kilometers or something of that factory. And there'll be many different options, so in terms of the cost of making the repair, it will be fairly easy. And so, but in Kenya, we're also competing. We have the tea factory. It's possible that we might have to send that same gear to that same company in India and wait for another 4 months, whereas the factory in India is only waiting for about 4 days to get the correct, the repaired part. So you see where this complexity becomes very important. Now at Gearbox, we're looking at how we'll interface between, as I said, those who have ideas and the marketplace. The type I described, the type of person I described is those with an engineering background first, but we also make possible accessibility to our space and technologies to people who have, they're engineers genetically, but they haven't had the opportunity to go and learn engineering in the university. Kenya has a very large informal sector, and a good portion of that is people who are artisans, working metal. We all know people who are welding and you know, fabricating steel parts and so on, and also carpentry and the like. And so our aim is to be able to serve both those innovators who have an engineering degree and those who have not. And the ones who have not might be educated in other, you could be a neurosurgeon, or you could be somebody who doesn't even have Form 4, but your commonality is that you don't have an engineering education. So 83% of the workforce in Kenya is in the informal sector. So if we're not focused there, then we're not really doing much. So what we try to do at Gearbox is to link our engineers with the needs of those artisans and make machines that our own engineers are building. So we build machines that are akin to what's happening within, to be honest, the third industrial revolution, not really the fourth industrial revolution yet, but that's the pathway that we're following. So there's a class of machines called Cnc Machines, computer numerical control. They're machines that that are driven by a computer. So you've designed the part on the computer and then you send it just like you would a Word document to the printer. In a very similar sense, your design is now made by the computer. We've made machines like that, plasma cutters, wood routers, 3D printers we make locally, our own engineers make them. We also have pipe benders, which now you can, like all the chairs that you're sitting on, have a pipe that's had to be bent into shape to make the chair. So now the problem, if you give it to Juakali and you ask for 100 chairs, you'll get 100 chairs and each of them is unique. Each of them has a slight different bend and so on. And that's the problem with the informality within the informal sector, is that you cannot be given an order within the formal sector because you don't have controls over your production. And your productivity is also very low. So that's what we're targeting. We're also looking very closely at which particular products can be supplied using this chain, this supply chain. For example, water tanks. We have a machine for making roto-molded tanks, the typical tanks that we see all over the place. And one of the things about the tanks, like the blue one sitting over there, that's a small one, but you know that we can make even 10,000 liter tanks. If you look at a lorry taking tanks from Nairobi to Nakuru, it's probably carrying a lot of air. So if there are 10,000 liter tanks, there's maybe 4 on that lorry. Now, if we make the machine, because we make the machines that can make those water tanks, and we give them to a micro industry in Nakuru, now that same lorry will be carrying the raw material plastic. And so, so it will be carrying plastic worth maybe 200 tanks rather than just the 4 that are being carried on that lorry, because they don't pack very well. So now there is a chance for the micro industry to be able to compete with the large company in Nairobi, which has the advantage of economies of scale. So, but if we do the same, because we also make machines that are called vacuum formers that can make egg trays or these small plastic trays for holding mushrooms and so on, but those kinds of products pack very well. So when you deliver them to the micro factory, you will lose out because the big company has an evident advantage through economies of scale. So looking at it more granularly in our approach is very important. We've been able to work with the MasterCard Foundation and Kenya Commercial Bank Foundation in a project that has stepped up to Jiajiri, which I think many of you are familiar with, and it's purely directed towards creation of jobs. There's been a few things that have happened with respect to COVID that has meant that we're not re-looking at the project, but the idea that we have, especially where Gearbox as a manufacturing partner is concerned, is to set up centers around the country where Juakali can come in, use the machines to use them, and then deliver to the marketplace. And we also assist them in identifying that market. And a lot of that market needs to be government procurement. And so then we now leverage some of these modern technologies to be able to say they can use them on a shared basis. Some of them will do very well because they also have a business sense, or they partner with somebody who's good at business. And then those can be given loans, for example. So if we set up Juakali Association for this purpose. We are now under the National Federation of Juakali Associations. So we can go to the government and say, you have procurement needs. You need, from a policy perspective, to be able to buy, let's say, hospital beds from Kenyans, let's say, and you want it from Juakali, desks for schools, and so on and so forth. So we're saying now we can be able to broker that on behalf of the Juakali, and instead of the government now signing deals, hundreds of deals with micro industries, many of them, they have one block because as an association. So this is what we're pursuing very closely, and overlaid on that is the fourth industrial revolution types of technologies that these people will access, and with a view to creating local OEMs. Another thing that we need to be able to be very aware of is we have had, for example, people who design automated systems for the factory floor. So somebody, this is a real case, designed a control system for a bread manufacturing factory, and they were able to fix the existing system that was made by a European company. Very, very good system. The European company has decades of experience and so on, but because of the developments in technologies, these young engineers were able to fix what was broken at a very small fraction of the cost if they had had the European company come and repair it. Now the challenge becomes, if you have that repair, and the factory manager has to justify getting the solution from a local person who just finished university 4 years ago, maybe has a very small company, in terms of the risk, there's a challenge. So if that system doesn't work, or it fails in 2 months, and there's so much bread going to go to waste, or the production goals will not be met, that risk now may become difficult, so that they may not take this solution due to the risk. So there needs to be some intervention from government to provide incentives for large companies to be able to take that risk, maybe some tax incentive or something, so that we begin to grow our own Siemens and such companies, which are very big and powerful. Because at the end of the day, unless you have these incentives, and even I'll go as far to say protectionist type policies, you cannot compete with people who have been making these things decades. You can't just wake up and start doing some CNC machining and compete effectively with people who have been doing it for much longer, except if you look at the specifics and where you can do it and have an environment that protects. So for me, the need for us, because of where the world is going with the fourth industrial revolution, to have interventions that make sure that we grow in our competitiveness, and not just in a way that a few companies are having that growth, but we try to make it as grassroots as possible, so that many people can have that advantage and build on government expenditure. If the government will spend, like there's a plan to do, the DLP1, the Digital Learning Project, the laptops for schools, is complete. It was about 30 billion shillings, and now DLP2 is supposed to launch at 64 billion shillings. If the government has expenditure of that size, there must be a plan within that expenditure to grow industry locally. There must be companies who now will come up on the back of that expenditure, which is taxpayer money. If it's roads, the same thing applies. And so these are the interventions that we're seeking from government. We at Gearbox now have a partnership. We have two private companies, the non-profit. One of them is a joint venture with a British firm called Europlacer. Europlacer makes the machines that make circuits. So when you open your phone or your radio or whatever, and there's that green circuit board, it's called a printed circuit board. Some people call it a motherboard. We're now able to make those at any scale within Gearbox using this partnership. And I think this is a very important thing from the point of view of the product space development that I described before. Electronics has been identified as a key industry that should be focused on from a policy perspective, to be able to grow that product space and make sure that we remain competitive going, because the fourth industrial revolution is based on a bedrock, especially of electronics. The other element of the fourth industrial revolution that's critical is biotechnology. And Kenya has, even before we became Silicon Savannah, through the 70s, we were producing all kinds of seeds locally, and all kinds of that ended up in the seed companies that you see on Kijabe Street and so on. That was technology developed at University of Nairobi, which was the only university then, and then moved on to the private sector. But the university was never paid for it. So now we know we have a strong sort of strength rather within biotechnology. ISIPE was founded, Professor Thomas Odhiambo. ISIPE does entomology research that is world-class. In the same sense that we send people out to do research in developed countries, technologically developed countries, they send people to study entomology, insect research here, and it's based a lot of it on molecular biology. So we do have the basis, a lot of graduates within molecular biology who are in country, who should also be supported and are a fundamental part of the fourth industrial revolution. So from a policy perspective, there need to be a lot of interactions between these people. Electrical engineers can make machines like the Pcr machine. We all know what a Pcr is because of COVID, but this machine is what multiplies a small sample of DNA in order for it to be tested and to be worked on for research. And those machines can be made quite easily. In fact, we have made them in our lab. And the research that goes into new drugs in the world, 97% of that money is for diseases in rich countries, because those are who can pay back for the research expense. 3% is for the rest of us. So if we can get people making locally, then you'll start to see that develop in a manner that makes more sense to our economy. So it's important for us to look at it sectorally, and from a policy perspective, try to harmonize all of this together. I've said a lot, I think my time is up, but I hope the message has been conveyed that really the solution to getting to this, to be able to keep up with the fourth industrial revolution, will rely very much on, yes, nurturing innovation and human capital, which is typical, or rather fundamental, and we do have it in abundance. I visited the most advanced automaker in the world, is Tesla, arguably. Some people may argue against that. But the factory there, I walked in, it was maybe 6-7 times the size of this tent, even bigger. And it was at full operation, and there was nobody there, maybe 3-4 people. And it was just robots moving around. And I was being taken around by a young man called Charlie Mwangi, who was the head of the team that developed that factory. He was heading 400 engineers, and when he left Tesla, he was reporting directly to Elon Musk. So we have the human resource. Now he's Senior Vice President of Research at Rivian, the competitor of Tesla. We have a human resource. The question now is, how can the policy environment nurture and gather all of this to be able to take us to where we need to go? So I want to thank Kenya Association of Manufacturers very much for this opportunity, and I think I'll end there. Thank you all very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for that, Daktari. So of course, like he says, the human resource is there, the skill is there, so it's more about linkages. And there he said, probably even taking a protectionist stance as far as our country is concerned, to protect those nascent markets and economies as they grow into a more mature stance, of course. So more conversations on that particular topic coming up. But I want to move into another space, and that's all to do with construction. Of course, even when the government gave its numbers in, we did see a big growth in terms of construction activity and its contribution to the GDP as well. But the big question is, as we get into 2022 and beyond, what does the future look like as far as construction is concerned within the country as well? And to take us through that, we have Engineer Crispas Ndinyo from the National Construction Authority. A round of applause for the engineer as he comes on stage.
Yeah, all protocols observed. Good morning. I was being carried away by the gearbox. And I was getting excited and nearly forgot that I was to make a presentation this morning to do with construction. Yeah, you've been told my name, and I come from the National Construction Authority, and we are all over this country doing construction, and sometimes you find that people reach their homes late because of construction, and sometimes people get challenges of unsafe constructions, and despite all that, we are here to regulate the industry and ensure that our constructions are safe and healthy. At the NCA, National Construction Authority, what do? We register contractors, we accredit construction workers and site supervisors, we register construction projects, we conduct training and capacity building for the industry, and we also conduct research for the industry on materials, technologies, with an essence that we advise the minister on some of those technologies and some of the materials that come in the industry. In training and capacity building, we have programs where we train contractors, we train workers, that is the skilled workers, and the site supervisors on issues to do with construction. And after getting those trainings, we give them CPD or CTD points. If you are a contractor, you get CPD points. And if you are a worker, you get CTD points. This is basically for the renewal of your practicing license. In 2014, at Bomas of Kenya, we called all the people in this country who are doing the activities of construction, and we gave them, all of them, briefcases, because before 2014, there was a lot of talk that dealt with briefcase contractors. So when we gave everybody a briefcase, now we say, now from today henceforth, all of you are now no longer going to be called briefcase contractors, but you are going to be called professional contractors. So I don't expect to find anybody in this country who's called a briefcase contractor, because now when everybody has got a briefcase, then it doesn't make any sense for you to be called a briefcase contractor. We have professionalized the construction industry, that everybody who is doing the business of construction, he is now a professional. The NCA Act of 2011 stipulates that nobody shall be allowed to do the business of construction unless you are registered by the National Construction Authority. And so nobody does business in the four corners of this country unless the same is registered with us. And so we conduct those trainings, particularly looking at our workers because of the point of interest, our discussion this particular morning. This particular year alone, we are planning to conduct training to 19,000 persons, of which 7,000 are going to be contractors in the industry, and 4,000 are supervisors, and 8,000 are skilled construction workers. So in terms of workers, we're looking at training 12,000 workers in this.
And